Title: Shadows of the Andes, a story of the Colombian conflict. Chapter 1: The Land of Coffee and Blood. The early morning mist draped itself over the rolling hills of Antioquia, where the scent of fresh coffee beans mixed with the earthy aroma of the Andean soil. This was the land of Alejandro Vargas, a humble farmer who, like his father before him, tilled the land to provide for his family. His wife, Rosa, spent her days tending to their small cafe in the village of San Gabriel, while their two sons, Miguel and Diego, dreamed of leaving the countryside for the bustling city of Bogotá. But in Colombia, dreams were fragile things. The year was 1964, and war was coming to San Gabriel. For years, tension had simmered between the conservative landowners and the growing leftist movements inspired by the Cuban Revolution. The government, fearing communist expansion, had cracked down on rural communities suspected of harboring guerrillas. When the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, FARC, was formed, it marked the beginning of an armed struggle that would last for decades. One evening, Alejandro sat outside his home, watching the fireflies dance above the fields. A group of men in worn-out fatigues approached. "Señor Vargas," one of them greeted, his voice firm but polite. "We are fighting for the people. We need your support." Alejandro knew what this meant: give them food and shelter, or be labeled a traitor. He nodded hesitantly. That night, his family hosted their first guerrilla fighters. It would not be the last. Chapter 2: The Seeds of War. San Gabriel, once a peaceful farming village, became a battlefield. The government, aware of guerrilla activity in the region, deployed soldiers to the area. Alejandro's land, caught between the FARC and the military, became dangerous ground. His son Miguel, a fiery 18-year-old, admired the rebels. "They fight for justice, Papa," he argued. "For the people." "But at what cost?" Alejandro countered. "Killing? Fear? This is not justice." Diego, younger and more cautious, remained silent. But the war had already made its decision for them. One afternoon, the military arrived. They accused Alejandro of collaborating with the guerrillas. Soldiers searched his home, overturning furniture, scattering his wife's neatly folded linens. A young officer, barely older than Miguel, held a rifle to Alejandro's chest. "Where are they?" he demanded. "There is no one here," Alejandro said calmly. The officer raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a gunshot echoed through the hills. The guerrillas were attacking. The village erupted into chaos as bullets ripped through homes, flames engulfed the marketplace, and the scent of gunpowder mixed with the aroma of burning crops. When the dust settled, Alejandro's home was in ruins. His wife, Rosa, had been struck by stray gunfire. She lay motionless in his arms, her lifeblood seeping into the soil she had so tenderly cared for. Miguel was gone. Chapter 3: Guerrilla and Ghosts. Months passed with no word from Miguel. Alejandro and Diego fled to Medellin, seeking refuge among distant relatives. The city, already infamous for the rise of Pablo Escobar and his Medellin cartel, was no sanctuary. Crime, corruption, and cartel violence made it just as dangerous as the countryside. Then one evening, Alejandro saw him. Miguel, clad in guerrilla fatigues, rifle slung across his back, walking alongside men who now called him Comandante Leon. The sight crushed Alejandro. His son had become what he once admired, a revolutionary fighter. "Papa, I did what I had to do," Miguel said when they finally met in secret. "They killed Mama. I couldn't stand by." Diego, still a boy, pleaded, "Come home, hermano." "There is no home, Diego," Miguel whispered. "Not anymore." Chapter 4: The Drug Lords' War. As the 1980s progressed, the war was no longer just between the government and the guerrillas. The cartels had entered the fray. The FARC, once ideological warriors, began financing their war through the cocaine trade, partnering with drug lords in a twisted alliance of convenience. By 1993, as Escobar fell, other cartels and paramilitary groups filled the void. Los Peeps, the right-wing paramilitary death squads, hunted down guerrillas and their supporters with brutal efficiency. Alejandro feared for both his sons, Miguel in the FARC, Diego trying to stay out of the conflict. But in Colombia, neutrality was not an option. Chapter 5. The Final Betrayal. The early 2000s brought Plan Colombia, a U.S.-backed military campaign against the guerrillas and drug trade. Bombings, mass arrests, and brutal raids intensified the war. One evening, Alejandro received a message. Miguel was in trouble. His unit had been ambushed by paramilitaries. Without hesitation, Alejandro and Diego traveled deep into the jungle, guided by an old friend who sympathized with the rebels. When they found Miguel, he was wounded, his once strong body reduced to skin and bone. "Papa," he whispered, "I made a mistake." Alejandro held his son, feeling the weight of decades of war in his arms. But before they could flee, soldiers descended upon them. A man in a paramilitary uniform stepped forward. "We know who you are," he said coldly. "You shelter rebels. That makes you one of them." Gunshots rang out. Alejandro fell to the ground. He reached for his son, but Miguel was already gone, dragged away by the soldiers. Diego screamed, but there was nothing left to do. Chapter 6. The Ghosts of War. Years passed. The war officially ended in 2016 with a peace agreement, but the scars remained. Alejandro, now an old man, sat outside a Bogotá cafe, staring at the mountains where his family had been torn apart. Diego, now married with children, visited often, but neither spoke of the past. One evening, a young woman approached. "Señor Vargas?" she asked. "Yes." She handed him a letter. It was from Miguel. Alejandro opened it with trembling hands. "Papa, if you are reading this, I am either dead or a ghost of who I once was. I regret everything. But I want you to know, I fought believing I could protect you, not knowing I was destroying everything instead." Tears welled in Alejandro's eyes as he folded the letter. The sun dipped below the mountains, casting long shadows over the city. The war was over. But for Alejandro, it would never truly end. Conclusion. This is not just the story of Alejandro. It is the story of thousands of Colombians who lived, fought, and lost during the decades-long conflict. Their voices echo in the hills, whisper in the jungles, and linger in the ruins of forgotten villages. May we never forget their stories. If you liked this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a part of our community. Here, you will find historical wars, inspiring stories, and unique content based on real events. If you want to see more engaging and fact-based stories, hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest videos instantly. Your support means the world to us. Leave a comment and let us know what topics you'd like us to cover next. Raising hands fire. Bell, subscribe, share, and help us bring these incredible stories to the world.